Now that we have another take on James O'Barr's The Crow coming out soon, it'll be exciting to see how much the story is adapted to modern times. Over the years, there have been many interpretations of The Crow, with each one taking on a different arc based on the setting to which it belongs. Some of these renditions of the titular hero had to face a wide variety of gruesome and awful people who sometimes deserved their death at the hands of the Crow. Let's look at all the varieties of the Crow that we've seen in movies and comic books over the years, starting from the original story from James O'Barr. Before we get into our explanation, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Eric Draven. Eric Draven was the very first of the beings resurrected by the Crow, and we learned about it through the works of James O'Barr and the 1994 film of the same title, The Crow. This story was inspired by the real-life tragedy of James O'Barr when his wife was killed in a car accident because of a drunk driver. Eric and his wife were killed in the most tragic way possible by a gang of thugs just a day before their marriage. These thugs raped his wife, Shelley, and threw him off the building to his death. Later, the Crow resurrected him to take vengeance against the gang involved in the double homicide. Eric Draven's version of the Crow set many patterns in terms of the personality and the powers of the character that were present in the other renditions of the character. These include the black patterns around his eyes and his ruthlessness in killing his enemies. Some of the different versions of the character evolved, while the others had various versions of the powers based on plot convenience. Mark Dacascos and Brandon Lee portrayed this character in the 1994 film and a TV series inspired by it. Bill Skarsgård will be taking on the role in the upcoming adaptation, with FKA Twigs taking on the role of his fiancée, Shelley Webster. Joshua Zane. Fans of DC Comics might find this second version of the Crow similar to Jonah Hex, since the latter has a similar story regarding his resurrection. Joshua Zane was the protagonist in James O'Barr's The Crow, Dead Time, and he also suffered a fate similar to Eric's when some soldiers killed him in the Old West. His wife and his son were also murdered in front of his eyes by a gang of marauders who were taking advantage of the chaos caused by the Civil War. After burning down his house to honor his family, Joshua walks miles to reach the burial ground that belonged to his Crow nation. Unlike Eric, Joshua was resurrected 100 years later by the Crow to seek vengeance against the people who were involved in his family's murders. But since they were all dead, he went for the reincarnation of the individuals who were also a murderous gang of thugs. Unlike Eric, Joshua's reincarnation discovers that his face is covered with war marks for his people, and by the end of his journey, the color becomes jet black, which indicates the color of revenge. One might think it doesn't make sense for the Crow to kill their reincarnations, but then Joshua looks at it as a second chance given to these thugs to correct their ways, and they didn't, and repeated their actions in this life as well. Iris Shaw. Iris Shaw is the third rendition in the world of the Crow introduced by James Vance in The Crow, Flesh and Blood. She is also the first female Crow in the comic books, since a female Crow appeared in the 1998 series The Crow, Stairway to Heaven. Her story is a lot darker than any of the others we've witnessed so far, as she was killed while pregnant in a bomb that was planted in her office building. Following her resurrection, she realizes she wasn't sure whether she was going to keep the baby or not. She realizes that that decision had been taken away from her by the people who killed her. Flesh and Blood in the title is a reference to her unborn child who fuels her vengeance. She applies makeup to her eyes, similar to the version we saw in Eric Draven's Crow, but before going on her last mission, Iris cleans up her face because she intends to make sure the people who killed her can have a clear look at her face and know that it's she who has come back to seek vengeance. In the final scene, she kidnaps her primary antagonist, Ray Henderson, in a Jeep, pours gasoline over herself so that she can burn in the car, killing Ray as well, stating that this was for her flesh and blood. Ash Corbin. Ash Corbin is the second Crow to appear on the big screen in the sequel to the 1994 film The Crow, City of Angels. Ash was a mechanic and owned a body shop while staying with his son, Danny. One fine day, a ruthless gang was doing something near their shop when Danny stumbled upon them, so the gang tied them up and killed Danny. Ash had begged them to leave Danny out of it, but they went completely against his wishes and later shot him dead and then dumped both of their bodies into the water. Upon his resurrection by the Crow, he finds himself at Sarah's place. Fans might remember Sarah as the girl who was Eric and Shelley's friend from the first film. Sarah plays a more significant role in this movie as she has visions of what happened to Ash and is also the person who tells him about the purpose he has to serve after his resurrection. Like Eric, Ash takes his revenge one by one, but unlike Eric, he has some abilities we haven't seen before. These include strength and speed, which make him better than his opponents, other than having immortality. He also seems to have some control over the Crows, which gives him scenes similar to Batman's, where he controls the bats. After completing his mission, Ash reunites with his son in the afterlife. Michael Corby. Michael Corby was the fourth take on the Crow, introduced by James O'Barr in The Crow: Wild Justice. Unlike previous interpretations of the character, this was the first time we would witness two different crows in the same graphic novel. There was an experimental tone to this story as it was divided into 3 issues, each providing the point of view of a different character. It has a Rashomon effect to it when we get to see the first issue being from the POV of the person who gets killed, the second from the POV of the killer, and the third and the final issue from the POV of the cop who is trying to investigate the case. Michael Corby gets killed along with his wife when 2 young punks are hijacking their car. Their murder was unnecessary since these 2 punks only wanted to get a hold of the car, but somehow ended up killing them. Unlike the previous enemies faced by the Crow, this time around, the person who killed Michael felt the guilt of what he had done, and when Michael is resurrected and faces him, he tells him about the nightmares he has where he thinks about the blood on his hands. Michael Corby's character design is very different from that of the other Crows, as he has marks on the side of his face, giving him a much grimmer look. Alex Corvus. Alexander Frederick was the protagonist in The Crow: Salva, the 3rd film in the Crow franchise released in 2000. Unlike the other Crows, Alex feels younger, and thus the story doesn't live up to the different versions of the Crows. He was in love with Lauren Randall and had decided that he would make his future with her, but Lauren was brutally killed by a couple of people who stabbed her 53 times and then got rid of the body and planted the knife in Alex's car. Alex was falsely accused of the murder and sent to the electric chair. He ends up dying at just 21 years old. The Crow resurrects Alex so that he can do justice for Lauren and his soul by killing the people responsible for their tragedy. Alex finds out that there is a larger scheme of things involved in Lauren's murder, and his enemies are somehow prepared for the Crow. They make him vulnerable by getting hold of the Crow and wounding him, but the Crow manages to escape, and Alex can get his final retribution. Alex kills the police captain involved in the murders in the same way as he was when the captain burns to his death on the same electric chair. After completing his mission, Alex returns to the land of the dead to reunite with his lover. In one particular scene, Alex merges with the Crow to gain momentary flight. Mark Leong. Mark Leong debuted in the comic book series The Crow: Waking Nightmares, and Christopher Golden created it. Unlike previous versions, Mark Leong was a law enforcement officer who was killed when his identity was revealed when he was working undercover with the Triads of Chinatown. He was killed along with his wife, and his twin daughters were on the verge of being sold into human trafficking. The Crow resurrected him to seek vengeance for his wife and himself, and, well, the Crow didn't specifically mention it, also to save his daughters from being sold by the Triads. Well, it's assumed that the case is straightforward and would involve killing the Triad leader who ordered his and his wife's death. There are layers to the story, and he isn't the only one seeking justice. Mark only puts on the ritualistic Crow makeup after going on his first strike at vengeance by killing the person directly responsible. Towards the end, when he gets a hold of the person holding his kids hostage, something inside him stops him from going through with killing him, which leads to an argument with the Crow that was hinted at early in their interactions. As a cop, Mark always wanted criminals to be treated with justice, and this prevented him from killing them. Mark then jumps to his death, but the Crow lets him know that what he has done means he will never be able to reunite with his wife, and he'll be wandering all alone. Hannah Foster. Hannah Foster makes her debut in the 15th episode of The Crow: Stairway to Heaven, playing the first female rendition of the Crow in the franchise. Her tragic origin story is associated with her daughter's death when the duo was held captive in an attic and died of thirst. Hannah had to suffer more since her daughter died before her, and she only died 3 days after that. But she wasn't the only Crow in the world, since Eric was there to guide her through it, and the two of them were able to deal with their pain and get a better understanding of their situations. Hannah doesn't kill Ken, the person responsible for her and her daughter's death. She instead makes him suffer the pain that her daughter experienced before her death. It's similar to what Eric does in this version of The Crow. Thus, he gets stuck in the living world. While Hannah imagines she'll be freed to return to her daughter, that isn't the case, as she also gets stuck in the land of the living. But in one of the later episodes, the Crow gives her another mission when a child is kidnapped. Bobby Phillips played Hannah Foster, and she proved to be a worthy addition to the franchise. She provides an interesting take on this female rendition of the character. Jimmy Cuervo. Edward Furlong might be remembered for his role in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, but he also played the role of the Crow in the 2005 film The Crow: Wicked Prayer. Well, the movie isn't among the franchise's best. He gives us a unique rendition of the character. James Cuervo, also known as Jimmy Crow, yeah, that's pretty convenient, was an ex-convict who killed a Raven Aztec football player because the latter was going to rape Lily, the girl James was in love with. She was also the daughter of Harold, who was the tribal chairman. Luke Cross and his gang then killed killed James, and later his heart was cut out for some sort of satanic ritual. While it might seem that over time the Crow is just about resurrecting anyone to seek revenge, things get a lot more exciting when Lucifer also enters the playground. As James realizes he's alone against the satanic group, the tribe comes along and helps him. And at one point they do the crow dance, since that was something that Lily used to believe in herself. Jimmy manages to kill Luke, who has revealed that the murders weren't just homicides and were planned attempts, and then he returns to the spirit world to reunite with Lily so they can finally be together again. Jamie Osterberg. This time, the Crow is based in Tokyo. To be completely honest, it's an American based in Tokyo. Jamie Osterberg is studying in Tokyo and is also engaged to his girlfriend, Haruko. Meanwhile, an evil corporation has managed to figure out a technology that can transfer souls between two bodies, and Haruko's body is their target as their CEO has cancer, so they kidnap her and take her body. When Jamie finds out about this, he goes to investigate, only to find that her body has been taken over by someone else and she isn't interested in talking to him anymore. Later, her soul, stuck because of what happened to her, comes to speak to him, and she asks him to help her. But before he could take any action, the goons shot him to death. While Jamie is the primary antagonist here, his path to finding Haruko and freeing her involves a lot of other characters, including an Ikiryo, who becomes a considerable opponent. Jamie frees many other souls stuck because the corporation's people have taken over their bodies. The final battle takes him to Hell, where he fools a demon into freeing Haruko. Later, they reunite and head towards a peaceful place for the souls. Over the years, fans have wanted to see this story on the big screen because of its wide variety of elements, including references to many creatures and supernatural beings from Japanese folktales. Salvador Quivo. Imagine Matt Murdock's father's story as his family gets killed in front of him, and then he's killed only to be resurrected to take vengeance, but there's a twist. Salvador Quivo was a young boxer who went against a vicious drug gang's wishes to take a fall. This results in his family being tortured and killed in front of him, followed by his death at their hands. The Crow resurrects him to take vengeance for his family and himself. As he starts on this path, he discovers a more extensive plan behind the brutality his family had faced and starts uncovering it layer by layer. But Salvador won't only be facing mortals, since Santa Muerte as death itself faces him in a fight when the antagonist turns out to be one of his devotees. But he manages to survive it only to discover that his family has survived and they are being kept somewhere else after going through some horrible treatment. This rendition of The Crow is very raw, and even Drew Moss's art style makes it look like a fantastic action piece. There are moments where the gore and blood can go to a crazy limit, but that's something that one could expect from these stories. Many elements in this story are similar to The Crow, Dead Time, except the ending we get here is a lot more peaceful than that. Bernard Wright. X-Files fans should prepare for the unexpected and awesome crossover comic, X-Files / The Crow Conspiracy. This crossover series included 4 other properties coming together with the X-Files as the lone gunman investigated some urban legends. Bernard Wright is a state police officer chasing a federal vehicle chasing a van with the lone gunman. We find out that he's in a relationship with his partner and she's leaving her present partner. But right then, the federal vehicle manages to flip their car and it tumbles off the road. As his partner succumbs to her injuries, she lets him know that she is pregnant. Before he could do anything, one of the federal officers shoots him in the eye. Later, Bernard wakes up in the crematorium and heads back to his place, only to find a crow telling him that he has to carry out his spirit of vengeance against the people involved in his and his pregnant partner's death. Unlike other variations of the Crow, Bernard keeps his police uniform and doesn't wear any other makeup around his eyes, except he still has a massive wound in the place of his eye from the way he was killed. Bernard tracks down the federal officers and then kills them as they are about to kill the lone gunman, thus saving them at the same time. In the end, he goes to his lover's grave with flowers and lies down there, and we can assume that, like the others, he is reunited with his lover in the land of the dead. The story perfectly complements the adventure of the lone gunman as they try to uncover their own mystery, and thanks to the cyclical nature of media, they end up saved by another famous urban legend. Modlin Trial / Nobody. Yes, we finally get a story where the Crow is used as a medium to take revenge on the Nazis, in this interpretation of a story from The Crow Skinning the Wolves. Here we see Modlin Trial as the resurrected Crow going around killing Nazi officers at concentration camps and liberating the Jews on the way. The Nazis try to kill him in various ways, even putting him inside a crematorium and burning him, to which his reaction is to ask for a smoke. He manages to butcher every Nazi soldier on his way, and often there's a wild look in his face that is so so filled with the horror that he has witnessed that it makes for a great take on a Nazi revenge piece. Unlike the other crows, his origin story is revealed much later when he comes across the Nazi commander who was responsible for his tragedy. He's playing chess with a commander who manages to defeat him, to which the commander shoots his wife and then orders his and his daughter's execution. Modlin takes the commander to the place where all the Jews are burned and makes him go through all of it. Then he chokes him and tells him that he is every life that has been taken by the Nazis before killing him. As a couple of surviving Jews walk by and plan their path, he warns them about going to the next village and then walks away. This story is a fascinating depiction of the horrors of war during the Holocaust while sticking to the original concept of the Crow. Little about the character's past is known, substantially impacting the story's setting. Marcus Greaves. This character is from another crossover story. In it, Cassie Hack works with Marcus Greaves, whom the Crow resurrected to defeat an enemy. Cassie Hack is known for traveling the world to hunt and kill every slasher, but her partner, Vlad, is injured by an attack from what seems to be a crow. This crow could cause the end of all other crows because of a mystery, and thus we see Marcus Greaves come to Hack's rescue to help her solve the case. Marcus has already dealt with his vengeance and was only brought back to help Hack. Marcus's character and look are inspired by Eric Draven's version of the Crow, except for the details surrounding his origin. As Hack isn't interested in the crows and their tragic stories, Marcus gives her a piece of his mind by letting her witness his tragedy. He used to be a drag artist by the name of Missy Magpie, but a couple of neo-Nazis killed him and his boyfriend, which is why the Crow resurrected him. After taking his vengeance, he managed to unite with his partner, but he was called back when a crow hadn't returned, and his soul was required to bring it back. After ending the threat and freeing the crow to bring it back, Marcus performs a final act of kindness for Hack when he restores balance by going to the land of the dead and returning her friend Vlad to life. David Amario and Sarah Paladino. Published in 2018, The Crow, Memento Mori follows the tale of a young couple killed during a procession, and the Crow, due to the circumstances, resurrects both of them. This comic was created in collaboration between Edizioni BD and IDW Publishing and had a 4-issue run. Here, we see the story of David, who loves Sarah. When the duo is killed during a terrorist procession, David is resurrected by the Crow to take vengeance and kill the terrorist involved in his and Sarah's murders. But later, he discovers that one of his mentors, who had been ruthless with him before, somehow engages in all of this as it was his disciples who were the terrorists, and he had guided them to do this violent deed. But then, when he confronts him and is almost maligned by the father's words, Sarah appears, and it seems the Crow resurrected her. As she makes her move to kill the father, David stops her because he still believes in the father, and this only makes him weaker. Sarah manages to destroy their enemy and finally tells David that he has failed to fulfill the purpose he was brought back to life for, and then kills him. Then, she kills him as his crow also dies, and Sarah makes a promise to herself that she will make sure that she will not go back to the land of the dead till all such beings are killed, since she is no longer there to redeem her love. One can agree that this was one of the craziest endings to a Crow arc so far. Curare. Curare has to be the Crow story, which is the most different in its take, and it even goes against the Crow's general arc. Here we see the story of Detective Salk, who comes across the case of a 7 to 9-year-old girl who was brutally assaulted and left for dead in some fields. Salk is used to such cases, and cases like these affect him a lot. But this time around, thinking about the innocent girl leaves him in such deep thought that his wife ends up leaving him. During the autopsy of the girl, she wakes up and asks for his name, which scares him to death because nobody else hears it. But this isn't a hallucination, and later we find that the Crow has resurrected her to help the detective solve her case. As the detective fails to solve the case while we get to witness the disturbing event that the girl had to go through that led to her death, the girl, who has to be called Curare, helps him along with the Crow, whom she calls Birdie. When the detective deals with the harsh realities of the case, he gives her innocent responses to shield her from this world. But in the end, when he manages to get a hold of the person responsible for her and a lot of other such kids, she asks him to bring his head. She takes the head in a suitcase and walks away, probably to the land of the dead now that she's fulfilled her purpose. Null Narcos. Null Narcos appears in The Crow late as a freak circus performer who uses his powers following his resurrection as a circus trick. He didn't fulfill his purpose of killing those who were involved in his and his mother's death, and he does carry the guilt for that. As he spends his days in the circus, he does get memories of her and what she said before her death. But this won't last long as Calvin Morgrau follows him and starts killing his friends individually. When Calvin severely injures him, he goes to the conductor for the ride from the land of the dead to the land of the living. Calvin is after him because he strayed from the path of the Crow. Now Calvin will take the lives of the ones he loves instead of the ones who killed him. His real name was Vincent Tesmer, and he was burned to death with his mother. This story is a lot more exciting with some fascinating supporting characters, and even Calvin's character plays plays an essential role in explaining the depth of the Crow arc. As he manages to kill his enemies and then save his love, Naros is sent back to the land of the dead, while Calvin, who failed to kill everyone Null loved now, is ripped apart by the dead. Naros reunites with his mother as the conductor tells him he has fulfilled his purpose. Brandy! Imagine the Crow facing some of its enemies, but this time around all of them are professional killers, and even though they're taken by surprise, they do end up being quite the opposing force for our hero. Brandy appears in The Crow, Hark the Herald, a gore-filled, Christmassy take on the concept of the Crow. Here, we see a cabin where 6 professional killers get together every year to celebrate Christmas, but this time around, someone from last year will come and foil their celebration. Brandy was kidnapped along with her father and then killed by these murderers, and their bodies were dumped in different places. The Crow resurrected her to take vengeance on her killers, and she picked the same time to kill them one by one as they tried to figure out who she was. Finally, when they realized the truth of her identity, their attempts at killing her fail, and she manages to go through all of them very quickly. The final victim confesses and asks for forgiveness. Brandy doesn't kill her, as the Crow oversees the final victim. Vincent! Vincent appears in The French Crow, The Bride of the Crow. This story was a French publication and it hasn't yet been translated into English, but if you speak French and are a fan of The Crow, you should probably check it out. Vincent was a young makeup artist who faced a tragedy similar to most of the other Crows, as his lover, Evie, was killed. He tries to save Evie, who's an actress, from being raped by some of the other stagehands, but is instead killed himself. The Crow resurrects him a year later to take vengeance and kill the people responsible for his tragedy. Elora! Elora appears in The French Crow, The Blood of Innocence. Similar to some of the ex-cop versions of The Crow, Elora was working as an undercover cop to investigate a narcotics baron. While this story might sound like Mark Leong, an exciting twist occurs when she is killed and resurrected by the Crow. When she's going to kill her enemy, she discovers that he has a cyborg that feeds on blood. Yes, we see the Crow fight a cyborg in this story. And yes, it is awesome. Leandra! Leandra appears in The French Crow, The Medieval Crow, which, as the title suggests, is based in medieval times. The story gets even more tragic after the resurrection by the Crow, as he ends up doing something unimaginable. Leandra and his wife were killed under the authority of Lord Arturo. Arturo took his son as he was looking for an heir. As Leandra is resurrected, he manages to kill Lord Arturo, but mistakenly also ends up killing his son. Killing his son leads to the Crow abandoning him, and now he wanders around looking for why he failed to return to the land of the dead. Over the years, he killed a lot of people, and one of his victims was the well-known murderer, Jack the Ripper. Venus! Venus appears in The French Crow, Death on a Street Corner. Venus, whose real name is Erin Mirko, tried to convince her twin sister to stop working as a prostitute for a pimp who treated her horribly. When Hara goes to face them, he gets hold of both sisters and tortures and kills them. When the Crow resurrects Erin, she takes the name Venus and goes around taking her vengeance by killing pimps. She dons the clothes of a prostitute to make a statement and stands for all the other prostitutes who are treated horribly by their pimps. Marvelous verdict! The variety of stories and the various interpretations give us an insight into many tragic stories inspired by actual events. Some of these stories might not live up to the original concept of the character, but they still try to fulfill the purpose that the Crow was supposed to carry, that sense of tragic vengeance that's so essential to his character, and it's precisely what James O'Barr might have wished to do with his original graphic novel. The Crow is one of the best stories brought to the world of fiction, and if you look around yourself, you might feel how much it represents the cruelty that surrounds everyday life. That's all for now, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.